Hello everyone, thank you so much for tuning in today. I wanted to explore Mono Black right now. I know that Mono Black has been a very invasive deck into MTG Arena Standard, both best of one and best of threes, for quite some time now, but this is a critical deck to understanding if you want to succeed on the ladder. The last time that I hit rank 1 Mythic a few months ago, it was largely due to Mono Black. Both traditional and best of one. I like to play a combination of the two. It's important to understand both variations of this deck, and there really are two key variations right now. Depending on what you see on the ladder, if you are a mono black player yourself or a bit of a mono black connoisseur, then you'll also need to understand these variations to understand, depending on the decks you're running into on the ladder, what version that you need to play. And then there are a few flex slots that we can go over as well. So let's go ahead and jump into it. We really have two options. I want to show you what I believe is probably one of the more popular options right now. So this one is it's a more mid-range list, but it's pretty heavy on the top end. It starts spiking at 3 drops, and then you have a lot of 4 drops. Of course, Shieldreds, it plays 4 Apocalypse, which normally with legendary creatures you want to play maximum of 3, right? But this card is such a powerhouse, and it's so important to have this on turn 4 that these decks, no matter what variation you're playing, you're playing 4 of these. Now, next is you have you'll see some variation of Planeswalkers at the top end. The new Vraska is pretty common. Being able to cast this at 6 mana or 5 is incredibly important, and the ability is not terrible, especially if you can turn 4 Shieldred, turn 5 of Vraska. It's a pretty good combination. They normally throw in this new Shieldred here. I think this card is just insane. In my opinion, other than the 4 mana Shieldred, I think this card is probably just the best card in this version of the deck. It is extraordinarily good. In terms of just pure power level and what it's capable of, having a recurring creature removal spell enchantment saga is nuts, and it also has great stats too. This is not getting killed by a lightning strike or anything like that. White has a lot of removal for these types of cards, but it's not something that we definitely can't deal with. Okay, all right, perfect. So it's a little light on the lower end. Obviously, we have our 4 cut down and 4 go for the throat. Some number of 2 mana removal spells, depending on what you're running into on the ladder. Go for the throat these days seems to be the preferred option rather than losing 2 life to kill something with 2 mana. This one just has the stipulation of being a non-artifact creature. Comes up sometimes if you play up against any of the toxic decks, but for the most part, just 2 mana doomblading something is extremely good, always valuable. You'll see a lot of this too is, these mid-range, higher end mid-range lists that pop up, they tend to play a lot of weird 1-ofs, 2-ofs, and the 3 cards. The lists, in my opinion, are not very streamlined, right? Which you lose consistency, which is why I'm not a fan as much when people just start pumping in 1s and 2-ofs. Now, ordinarily, that's a strategy that you use whenever you're testing. However, once a deck has been out for a while or a meta has been going on for some number of weeks, usually those 1s and 2-ofs tend to get trimmed in favor of 3s and 4s. And maybe you run some things that are on the high end, like Planeswalkers, for example, as a 2-of, but running just like a little 1-of Shieldred's Edict or removal spell. That's something that does not seem very good to me. But this is a very popular list running around right now. Not to say you can't be successful utilizing this strategy, but it's not one that I would recommend. So since this deck is not as aggressive and it plays 26 lands here, with 4 Mishra's Foundries and a Mirror, so 5 non-black sources of mana. These games are meant to be grindy and go on long. That's what this deck is meant to do. So if you do not like long games, do not play this deck. You only play 3 Evolved Sleepers and 3 Tenacious Underdogs. And then on top of that, you play 2 Phyrexian Arenas. Now, the Phyrexian Arena is incredibly important because including this in your deck is pretty defining of what your playstyle is going to be. Whether you want to be a top-end control deck, stabilize, and then draw your way back to victory. You want to have additional game into control decks, then that's when you want to play Phyrexian Arena, right? If the entire meta is, mono red, or that's what you're running into, mono red or soldiers, uh, whether it's Azorius or mono white soldiers, you really do not want this card in your deck if that's what you're playing against. If you're playing up against a lot of mono black control, black white mid ranger control, any high end mid range deck or control deck, Demir, Esper, all those are very popular options right now. This is when you want Phyrexian Arena. So this list is a bit more catered to handle those types of decks. This list right here, again, this was a raw list I pulled from online that's really popular right now. I don't think this one is even catered to handle either of those strategies particularly well, whether it's aggro or control. If you really want game into the high-end mid-range and control decks, then you would probably want 4 Liliana, and we can go over what that looks like here soon. But this is the one variation of a mono black list. You really are just banking on surviving early, landing a Shieldred, either one, and then they'll play removal spells, you'll Phyrexian Arena, draw back into the game, and finish them off with, a Vraska or a Gix's command or something like that to recur threats. So that's strategy number 1. It's a fine strategy. The list can be fine-tuned. The other strategy, and this is the strategy that I prefer right now, is a bit more streamlined. So we don't have we do not have 1-ofs, but we do have a few 2-ofs, but they're very powerful 2-ofs that are catered specifically to the matchups that we plan on facing. We have 4 cutdowns, 4 Evolve Sleepers to handle the aggressive matchups. Evolve Sleeper is also great into control decks because it's a mana sink, so later in the game, pulling an Evolve Sleeper off the top of your library, whereas traditionally pulling a 1 mana threat on turn 7 or 8 is terrible, Evolve Sleeper is a complete powerhouse. You can immediately level it up, draw a card. It can be a removal spell because you can give it Death Touch. The card is insane whether you are playing aggressively or as a control deck. I recommend playing 4 Evolve Sleeper. The card is a powerhouse. Since this deck is catered to survive more against the aggressive things, because right now I feel on the ladder you're facing a lot more mono red and soldier variations or even enchantments. There's a lot of weird mono red variations going on right now. It's not necessarily just the haste lists. You're running into a lot of lists that play with oil counters and things like that as well. So just having these low threat creatures here that can also combo later in the game to draw you cards for free with Shieldred, it's very powerful just as a blocker or to have a threat to potentially finish the game if they have a slow start. You can tempo a win against mono red with Evolve Sleeper and Tenacious Underdog by having the right combination of removal spells and low cost threats, and then of course Graveyard Trespasser. So there are plenty of games into mono red or even soldiers where you can go, turn 1 Sleeper, turn 2 cut down their threat, evolve your Sleeper, attack for 2, turn 3 Trespasser, exile their thing, and then they're just done. And they can't respond to you anymore. They can't deal with the Trespasser with their Lightning Strike, else they have to discard their last threat. Now, to be fair, mono red has some recurring threats with Squee and with Phoenix Chick that can make the Graveyard Trespasser a little less intimidating to remove, but if they have to remove something else like your Tenacious Underdog, and then you can resolve the Graveyard Trespasser, and you've already killed their Phoenix Chick or Squee in the meantime, then you can exile it. So the Graveyard Trespasser is just a powerhouse, and often that is just game over if you're stable at 12, 13 plus life, and then you resolve this into mono red. Ordinarily, that's enough to win the game. Now, you have a few flex slots here. How many Liliana do you play? It's not that great against control. But where Liliana can really shine is if you are on the play against mono red, and let's say they turn 1 a Kumano, and then they turn 2 either a Feldon or a Bloodthirsty Adversary to get the counter, and then you untap, draw, play your third land, Liliana minus. It's especially good into the Feldon, but just being able to cleanly remove uh, those 2/2s that get a counter on them from the Kumano is incredibly valuable. And then it also soaks up 2 damage when they attack with the 2/2 enchantment that just flipped, because they'll attack the Liliana. So you get rid of the 3/3 and it saves you 2 life. That's 5 life for 3 mana right there, plus getting a card out of their hand essentially. Very powerful card, but you need to tweak how many you have here. I think 3 is probably a good number. 4 Shieldred 100%. Resolving this card, they have to use 2 cards to kill it. They have to, Lightning Strike, play with fire, or Lightning Strike, strangle, play with fire, strangle, whatever the combination is, or they have to throw a creature in front of it. They have to attack, and they turn 4 you go Shieldred, turn 4 they go Thundering Raiju, they attack, you block the Raiju, they then have to play with fire the Shieldred. It's a 2-for-1 no matter what, and if they do not remove it, then you just win the game on the spot. Plain and simple. Every now and then you can get a cheesy loss into something like a Shivan Devastator. They can sink a lot of counters into that late game if they even play that, which some mono red lists play 1 or 2 of them right now. Or Phoenix Chicks recurring. Sometimes the flyers can get in the way, but typically that's not a problem with cut downs, go for the throats, Shieldred Edicts. Also, to deal with flyers, we have Sorin the Mirthless. 4 mana for 2 Vampire Nighthawks is insane. Vampire Nighthawk costs 3 mana for a 2/3 flying lifelink. This gives you a Planeswalker that can produce 2 of those for 4 mana, or you can get card advantage with this. So control decks or aggro, this card's insane, but it's probably slightly better into the mono red and soldier list that are running around. Of course, you want something on the top end to really finish the game for you, and the 5 mana Shieldred fulfills that. You don't want too many of this type of threat, however, but this is what you're going to finish with whenever you're out of cards and you finally stabilized against one of the aggressive lists. Then, of course, if you expect to see aggro, I think playing some number of the Flesh Gorgers is correct. Also, this card has a bit of combination with the recurring nature of your deck here. So if you Shieldred, all creatures from all... So your mono red opponent will have to Lightning Strike this to survive, correct? But then, on turn 5, you can Shieldred, kill one of their creatures, block, next turn transform it, and then before you know it, you're getting all creature cards from all graveyards. Now you have a 7/5 lifelink. So this card is good in multiple ways. Sometimes it can just win you the game if they do not have the removal spell for it. Incredibly powerful card. We are a bit land heavy here at 25, but I think that's really what you want to ensure that you can cast your cards on curve. So this is my recommendation right now. Of course, this will depend on your unique ladder experience. Different parts of the ladder might be playing different things. So I have not played, I've been playing a lot more arena here lately and reading the articles and looking at the lists. The deck is slightly different than the last time I reached rank 1 mythic. However, there's not really that many changes within the meta since I last stopped playing. We have a few new toys that are a bit more popular, like the Shieldred, but for the most part, it really is the same deck that I remember with just a few changes. So currently I played for a couple of hours this week total, maybe 2 or 3 hours. Currently I'm in Platinum. I don't know if I'll be able to achieve Mythic by the end of the month. Today is July 29th as of this recording, but it's my plan to hit Mythic here in the future. It shouldn't be too difficult, but the list I would run if I'm playing mono black is this one. Now, as you get higher up on the list, higher up on the ladder, you may want to audible to playing a more controlling version, just depending on what you're facing. So, I know it's slightly counterproductive to Magic strategy to want to play a more controlling deck into control lists. Usually you want to be the aggro player or the control player, but the fact of the matter is that you need to draw cards to beat control, and only the more controlling versions of mono black can do that at the moment. That's my opinion of how to be successful with this deck. Also, it depends on if you're playing best of 1 or best of 3. Best of 3, I think there's more of an argument for playing the controlling version. Best of 1, I feel you should pretty much never play the controlling version, and you should only play a version that looks like this, a more aggro or lower end mid-range variant. this is where I would be right now playing best of ones. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this brief mono black deep dive. I hope to make some additional reviews like this of what deck specifically you should be playing right now. I'm going to do one on mono red and maybe another one on Esper. Stay tuned. I hope I can earn your subscription moving forward. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.